The future of the EU is uncertain, for reasons that are both obvious and unknown. The reasons you might be thinking of, like the migrant crisis, sharp divisions over Russian oil embargo, and of course Brexit, the war in Ukraine, and COVID, are all relevant and well known. But in addition to these challenges, I will be discussing the unknown challenges the EU will face and is currently facing in order to figure out whether it's most likely to shrink or expand. Now, the EU currently consists of 27 member states and is currently responsible for 15.3% of global GDP. This means it's certainly a force to be reckoned with. But despite its strength, Europe has been hit by crisis after crisis, raising major questions about the project's very survival. Add to this the increasing resistance to further EU expansion, owing to the issues I've just presented, as well as other external challenges. So, to find the answer, we need to first go back to the very creation of the EU, as it was one of the greatest events in global politics. See, the EU's beginnings were modest in focus but ambitious in operation. Combining former enemies into a trading zone seemed like a good idea to avoid a further European conflict. The focus remained twofold: limiting the threat posed by Germany by integrating it into European cooperation and providing for an increase in essential materials, namely coal and steel. This fostered the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951 to 1952 and European Economic Community in 1957, eventually transforming this beyond anyone's dreams. From an organization built to avoid war and provide for essential resources, Europe was transformed into a European Parliamentary Association in 1958, a customs union in 1968, a European monetary system in 79, single market in 93, and adopted a single currency, the euro, in 1999. The EU was so successful that many countries wanted to join, and this is shown in its history. Since its foundation, there have been 7 enlargements in which other countries have joined the founding members, starting in 1973. Right now though, there are 5 countries which are trying to join the EU: Albania, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey. But even though there are countries willing to join the EU, you shouldn't jump to a conclusion yet. The reason is that EU expansion is not always a simple and uncontroversial affair. You see, there have been divisions between France and Germany historically, Europe's most powerful states, on expanding the membership. While Germany has supported EU expansion, France hasn't been too enthusiastic. Instead, France wants further political and economic integration of EU members, something that Germany hasn't been too keen on. But even if these 5 countries are to join the EU, admitting members takes a very long time. An example of this is Croatia, that took 10 years from accession negotiations in 2003 to formal entry in 2013. The process itself has also been criticized. A good example is Greece, that entered the EU with some pretty unreliable financial data, to say it mildly. And there's a few important things you need to know about that whole situation, but first we need to know whether or not these 5 countries will end up getting into the EU or not. And 2020 was supposed to be the year that the EU would open talks with North Macedonia and Albania, but that didn't happen. The reason for this is that Macron vetoed their admission until the EU updated its entry requirements. Then we of course have Turkey, and to say it mildly, Turkish membership has been very controversial, and I guess the fact that Turkey's membership bid was halted by the EU in 2019 on account of the country's increasing restrictions on freedom of speech and political opposition had something to do with it. So expanding the EU is therefore pretty slow and really difficult. But why is this the case? I mean, the European Union had a booming economy in the mid-2000s where 10 new members were added. What could possibly have changed this trajectory? Well, now is the time we discuss the Greek bailout. This was a time where the EU faced the prospect of one of its members leaving the Eurozone. Yet, despite severe challenges, Greece remained in the EU, though under financial strictures imposed by Germany. And what Greece did was actually kinda messed up, as Greece joined the Eurozone in 2001 but concealed the true state of its finances with a little help from Goldman Sachs. Let me explain. Following the Greek election of 2009, the budget deficit was revealed to be over double prior estimates at 12% of GDP and was later raised to 15.4% of GDP. In response, the EU and IMF bailed out Greece in 2010 with 110 billion euros in 3 years' worth of loans, in exchange for significantly reduced spending. A second bailout, worth 130 billion euros, was later offered in 2012 by the EU and IMF, which made the EU tighten the financial expectations of member states. Understandably so. But surprisingly, they weren't done giving Greece money, as the EU offered a third bailout of 86 billion euros. Thankfully, Greece exited the final bailout program in 2018, although now owing the EU and the IMF approximately 290 billion euros. Yet still, Greece has remained in the European Union. This means that somehow the EU had swerved the most serious threat to its unity in history, which once again made the future of the European Union seem brighter than ever. But this is where things take a turn to the worse, as the EU's greatest challenge to survival was yet to unfold, that of course being Brexit, the UK's controversial referendum on membership of the European Union. The United Kingdom's withdrawal in 2020 marked the first time an EU member had left the project. Faced with Brexit, many wondered if the EU could survive. While support for the project remained relatively high across Europe, a majority of EU citizens expected that the project would dissolve within a generation. Despite this threat, however, no EU member state contained a majority of citizens who wanted to leave the bloc. Even the UK citizens didn't want to leave after they found out what the consequences were going to be as soon as they went alone. This led to EU member states actually growing closer together, as research revealed. Even the populations of states at risk of leaving, most notably Italy, identified significantly more as Europeans than the British before 2016. Ultimately, without an attractive alternative to membership of the EU, member states will seem unlikely to leave the bloc in the future. Although that's a bit of a lie, as there technically is another way. The European Free Trade Association, that focuses not on political integration but on liberalizing trade among EFTA members together with Europe and the rest of the world. The EFTA consists of Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein and Switzerland, and this is a bit of a strange constellation. While Iceland, Norway and Liechtenstein are also parts of the European Economic Area, which allows them to be part of the EU's single market, Switzerland is only member of the EFTA. And the strange thing about the EFTA is that these 4 states have to pay the EU for the structures and agencies which they use. Additionally, EFTA members have incorporated lots of EU laws and rules into their domestic legislation. But unlike full EU member states, they don't have as much influence within the EU as member states do. So there is an alternative, although this market has not been very popular, as most countries have decided to become full members of the EU, rather than simply members of a narrower free trade association, which makes sense. And with only 4 members, the EFTA has lacked significant power within the EU, which doesn't really make it an especially attractive option to other countries. But does this mean that the EU is safe? Well, no. And there's a very specific reason for that, as there are more subtle threats which undermine the EU's future. Events outside of the EU's borders, for example, have presented real challenges to the bloc's unity. In response to the 2015 migrant crisis, member states defied the Common Travel Area, also known as the Schengen Zone, to create national border surveillance. The Hungarian government led a coalition of countries, notably the Czech Republic, Slovakia and Poland, that refused to take refugees. The issue of immigration has fueled the rise of right-wing politics across the EU bloc. Right-wing populists have increased representation across EU members, with populists in power in Hungary, Poland and the Czech Republic. Which makes sense, as the EU itself is a global organization, stressing common community over national sovereignty with significant centralized power, an easy target for right-wing populists. These groups attack the EU's control of the economy and immigration and celebrate a vision of national independence located in nostalgia rather than reality. Global crises like the migrant crisis have made some member states, especially Hungary and Poland, increasingly critical of the EU's power. And these governments are not just critical of the EU, they are also undermining democracy in their own countries. Both the Hungarian and Polish governments have been accused of weakening the justice system, the independent media, and non-governmental organizations. This violates EU rules, but it did not stop either country from doing so. Never before have member states openly defied the EU's authority. So, in response to this, the EU Court of Justice announced that it would cut billions of euros in funding for both Hungary and Poland on account of them undermining democratic rights. The EU's authority, therefore, seems to have shrunk in response to crisis. So you might say, how powerful could the bloc really be if it can't even keep its own member states in check? Well, Russia's recent invasion of Ukraine seems to have reinvigorated the bloc's purpose and significance for its members. While anticipated owing to significant Russian troop buildup, its invasion of Ukraine shocked the world community. For the first time since the Second World War, Europe was plunged into war. This invasion upturned the global order and necessitated a transformation in the EU's role. Since the end of the Second World War and Cold War, the EU has focused primarily on economic development and extending political authority. This situation, however, has demanded a comprehensive rethink about the EU's role as a security and foreign policy agent. Far from weakening the EU project, the invasion dramatically strengthened the EU's resolve. At first, it seemed as if Russia's invasion might shrink the EU's authority, but it ended up doing the opposite. While the EU did respond with basic sanctions quickly, there were dividing points among nations over the extent of sanctions placed on Russia. Examples include Germany, that was reluctant to cancel the Nord Stream 2 pipeline as the thorny issue of reducing the bloc's reliance on Russian gas proved difficult for Germany, Italy, France, and others. As a bloc, the EU relies on Russian gas for approximately 40% of its energy needs. While the Baltic states and Poland wanted to ban Russian oil immediately, other states were more cautious. Germany, Denmark, and Poland fought against sanctions on Russian coal, while the Netherlands sought continued access to Russian oil. Furthermore, national priorities and geography complicated attempts to supply weapons to the Ukrainian defenders. Germany initially blocked the transfer of German-origin weapons to Ukraine from EU member countries. Add to this the nation's offer to send 5,000 helmets down there was all culminated in a widespread derision. So while all nations in the European Union seem to have different opinions and take differing actions, the EU has met the challenge posed by Russian aggression. Far from splitting or shrinking the EU, the invasion has renewed the vision and purpose of the zone. From the initial sanctions imposed, the Russian invasion has, as commentators noted, quote, reminded the European bloc of its Cold War origins. The EU has also offered an unprecedented extension of its power, offering hundreds of millions of euros in military funding for a non-member state. The war has reinvigorated the twin pillars of EU security and trade, the EU and NATO. Imbued with a renewed sense of purpose, the existential threat to European security seems to have unified a somewhat disunited bloc. The European Union has taken major steps to expand its power, which would likely have been unthinkable in peacetime, increasing defense cooperation, openness to expanding membership to Eastern Bloc countries, and using for the first time the Temporary Protection Directive to protect Ukrainian refugees with temporary residency. From a community beset by challenges to its authority from internal and external threats, the EU has become a major global foreign policy power which is spearheading resistance to Russian aggression. This transformation from soft power to hard has come very suddenly. From resisting and blocking efforts to arm the Ukrainians, the nation has now actively changed its pacifist policy, a guiding principle of foreign policy since the Second World War. The war truly has transformed the EU's role and, importantly, the extent of its power. The EU even has plans to create a 5,000-strong rapid deployment force to be ready by 2025. The creation of a full-on army in the European Union may still be a long way off though, but this foreign policy crisis has reinvigorated support for the project and an extension of EU power. But that's it for this video, and if you aren't already subscribed, I'd suggest you do so. I mean, if you like my videos and want to see them in the future, it's the best way to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.